The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. We are just 2 days away from Halloween. There's so much going on. I don't know about the rest of you, but here in Los Angeles, we're watching the Dodgers win and lose every available moment, and Halloween is gearing up, and it's just so many things in motion. I want you to know that for us, we're hard at work on the toy guide. We are just about a week and a half, my phone is dropping, from dropping the toy guide with all of its award winners, and it's a good one. It's a really good one this year. I'm really proud of the work that we've been doing. It's a passion of mine that I believe that it's going to make me emotional. I believe that if you put the right toy in the right individual's hands, that it unlocks their creativity, it ignites their hearts and minds to want to learn more. So we know that for all of you that your spending dollars are perhaps even tighter than they normally are this year, and that you want to buy a good quality toy that is going to help in some different aspect for yourself or for your child or the person that you love on the spectrum. So toy guide coming up, toy festival coming up. I'm very excited about it. But we're just, as I said, we're just 2 days away from Halloween. So in just a minute here, we're going to give you our last minute tips for making it a successful Halloween, because don't we all just want to have that normalcy? So that's coming up in just a minute. But before we get to that, I want to start by saying that we are live right now. Yes, I am doing the show from home in an abundance of caution because I felt a little off yesterday. And so we were like, let's not chance this. I think it's just that my butt is tired. I think that's exactly what's going on. But, want to be careful and considerate of our coworkers. But we're live. Today is the 29th of October, and the year is 2025. We're just about to put 2025 to bed. Is anybody else in shock over that? Anybody else having a little time dysmorphia over that? But anyway, we're live right now on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We'd love to hear from you about what your tips are for a happy Halloween. What are your traditions for making it successful? What do you want to talk about today? Because there's all kinds of things to talk about, and we're prepared to veer off of Halloween should that be necessary if you write in a question. So our fabulous Chris Desmond, just seriously, thank all that is good for Chris Desmond. He's showing you some of the different ways that you can connect with the show. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, but we will be podcasting directly after this show to every place that you get your podcast. It is a free download wherever you get your podcast, but it will come with ads. And we're all grown-ups. We know how that works, right? But if that's really not your thing, and we understand that for many of you, listening to the ads is not a woohoo, somebody else is paying for this. If that's you and you really are like on the treadmill and you want to focus on that, then please go to glow.fm/autism-live for a mere $5 a month. You get everything that we do at the Autism Network. By the way, that includes all the new Ask Dr. Doreen's, anything at all that we put out, you will get for free. Well, it's for $5, but you will get it ad-free in your inbox. You don't have to click anything extra. It just shows up in your inbox, which is great. Okay. I'll tell you, it's that time of year where a lot of times people say, how can we help support Autism Live? How can we help support the Autism Network? And I will tell you, there's a myriad of different ways. One of them is by checking out toys in the toy guide. That does help us. And if you purchase directly from there, we get a very small amount for the referral, but it helps us keep the lights on. But I'll tell you what helps more than anything else is if you give us a review on whatever platform that you watch us. We love reviews. That just keeps those lights humming, let me tell you. And it also helps other people like you find us. We do not pay for advertising. I'd met her before, but one of our wonderful moms who's on our viewer list a lot live came to the All Ghouls Gala the other day, and she said, it so touched me. She said, "I'm so glad the day that I found you." And whenever I go to a conference, I'll run into some people who are like, "Oh, we watch Autism Live and it's helped us so much." But I run into hundreds more people who are like, "What's that? Don't know what that is. Never heard of it." So when you give us a review, whether it's good or bad, it helps more people know about us. We're really about you being honest about what it is. I also have been talking to a couple of parents and individuals on the spectrum recently who've been giving me all kinds of ideas of things. They're like, "I wish you'd do a show on this." Oh, can I tell you how much that helps me? We've been doing the show for 15 years and I still haven't run out of topics. But when I know what you want, I used to say I gave up mind reading to be in the autism community. So you got to help me. Got to help me. Let me know what it is that you want. Okay, but you can be writing in right now with any questions at all or your tips for a happy Halloween. I think we've covered all that, except to say that our mission here is to provide information and inspiration. And our goal is to provide that to the larger autism community. That starts with individuals who are on the spectrum themselves, whatever words they use to describe that. They are the beating heart of our community. And so we like to address things that will help support them. We like to give them the mic whenever possible. That is who we are. But we also include in that community everyone who loves those individuals. That can be a parent, that can be a sibling, that can be a significant other, that can be a child of that individual, that could be a teacher, a therapist, anybody who loves those individuals. And of course, our goal, our hope is that eventually that's the world. Right? That should be the world. And it is not yet. That's a sad thing today, but we're working on it. And that's the best we can do today. Okay, so that's our spiely wheelie for this morning. It's time to dig in because Halloween is 2 days away. And if you're feeling a little bit of excitement, if you're feeling a little bit of trepidation, let's jump in here and talk about some tips for the day. And really the day after and the day after that for how we can ensure success. So here are our tips for a successful Halloween. First of all, I always like to do a disclaimer. My disclaimer for this entire thing is you got to release the expectations. This is different than releasing the Kraken. Holidays come power-packed with expectations, do they not? We all have this memory of it's not even the perfect holiday, but we're chasing a perfect holiday and there's different elements to it. Doesn't matter which holiday it is, but we have these ideas of what it should be like. I think for Thanksgiving, everybody has the ideal of that Rockwell Thanksgiving that you're putting the turkey on the table and everybody's gathered there and everybody's in nice clothes and the food is already made. And, these things are lovely. I love that picture that we have too, that amazing spread of pumpkins that only Martha Stewart and 5 other people in the world could pull off. You know what I'm saying? This took a month of planning. I'm just saying. So we have to be kind to ourselves and say, we're going to release the expectations of what we thought it was going to be, what we hoped it was going to be to make ourselves available for what it can be. Right? And this is something that those of us in the autism community, we got to make our peace with across the board, because who you thought you were going to be, who you thought your child was going to be, all that's just a lovely, lovely daydream. I'm not trying to take it away from you at all. If you've got time and you want to go fantasize about that and move towards that, absolutely. I'm all about that. But when we're talking about a specific day and it's 2 days away, we got to release that expectation in order to show up for what is. And I'll tell you something, that's not easy for me. Can I just be real with you? It is not easy for me, but when I can manage it even for a minute, I find that it's always better than what I had expected. If I just leave myself open to see what is miraculous in my life today. And sometimes it's the tiniest moment, but it's awesome because it's real. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is release expectations of what we thought the day was going to be and how we thought it was going to go. All right, let's move on to the next slide, Chris. It is critical. It's 2 days before Halloween. Hopefully you already have the Halloween costume. Hopefully you've taken a couple of minutes to rehearse with your child wearing the Halloween costume, but please take my advice today, put that Halloween costume on your child and take a bunch of pictures. They may be the only ones you get. At least they might be the only ones with part of the costume on or all of the costume on. So get your pictures today, because so often on the day of, the plan goes sideways. You know what I'm saying? Like you've got this whole thing, you got it scheduled out to the max, but your friend shows up a half an hour early with her 4 kids that are running, screaming around the house, that's making your child sensorily start to shut down, right? So get the pictures that you want of the costume today. I used to, they just don't have it as cheap as they used to, but they used to have a thing in our Walmart. And of course, they had the thing at JCPenney as well. And they had it at Sears. And somebody was always running a deal that you could go in and you could get 3 different shots. And it was just, I think it was $29 and you got 142 pictures. And so I used to go and just do that so that I wasn't behind the camera. And I have these gorgeous pictures of my son in every Halloween costume that he did like until he was 8. But it just isn't that cheap anymore. And people aren't running that deal. And I feel like there's a monopoly now. You know who I'm talking about? That, Sears doesn't do it anymore. Walmart doesn't anymore. And JCPenney does it, but it's run by the same company that takes your kids' pictures at school. So my advice is get out your phone, which takes really good pictures, and get some pictures of your kiddo today. But if you want to, if you've got a 1-hour photo or a 2-day photo or wherever that you can send them off to so that you actually have holding your hand pictures, it's going to help your child down the road. But the whole point is, if you get your picture now in the costume, then that's done. Tick that box. And then on the day of, you just get to experience it. Now, usually I'm a big fan of taking pictures and commemorating everything. But the reality is you're going to be juggling a whole lot of chainsaws on the day of, and you may not get them. If you can, and if you do, and if you've got enough help and support to support your child and take pictures, phenomenal. But not everybody has that, right? So either way, get yourself the shot that you want today in the picture. It'll count as rehearsal for your child. You'll have the pictures, and then you don't have to worry about it day of. Okay, let's go on to the next one. I think today is the day to make very clear amongst yourself and anybody who is going to be in charge of your child on the day of and the next week. Excuse me. Let's get real clear on what your candy rules are. Now, it's different for every family, and you get to decide what works for you. Some families I know are like no artificial colors and flavors. Other families are like no sugar. Other families are everything has to be organic, non-GMO. You decide what your rules are, but have a plan. And then I'm going to encourage you later on to stick to whatever the plan is. And I want you to decide today, if you haven't already, because you get into the day of and you're around other parents and you're around other kids, and the other kids are like, oh, your mom only lets you have, 1 piece of candy a day. And there starts to be all this peer pressure. I'm telling you, it's like an afternoon special, the peer pressure that the moms get from the other kids about allowing your child to go completely crazy on sugar. I want to remind you that your boundaries around what your child can eat and can't eat and how much of it are personal to you. And we're not taking advice from the 8-year-old who lives next door, because your child's ecosystem and what you're working toward and the goals that you're working toward are yours. I always tell the story about my mother loved ice cream. My mother loved candy. My mother loved sugar. And she felt that sugar in childhood were like this, hence, I have weight issues. And my pediatrician, before my child was diagnosed with autism, said to me, diabetes runs rampant in your family, and I'm going to ask you to be very stringent with even juice for your child. Don't ever give your child 100% juice. It has to be diluted at least half, and then don't give him sugar. That's what my pediatrician had said, who had many more degrees than my mother. You know what I'm saying? And then I was the mom and seeing how my kid was reacting. But once upon a time, my mother came to visit, and we had to stop at the Dairy Queen for her to get her Blizzard, because that was lifeblood to her. So we did, and she wanted to get my son something, and I said, no, 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 he won't eat that anyway, and he can't have that. And that just didn't sit well with my mother. So we walked into the house, and I was bringing her luggage up the stairs, and I heard my son coughing and choking and spitting. And I went, "What happened? What happened?" And she said, "Well, I just gave him a spoonful of my ice cream so that he could, because I just knew he'd love it." And she said, "And he spit it out, and he, and I said, "Yeah, Mom, he doesn't like things that are cold, and he doesn't like things that are creamy. He has real texture issues." And I said, "Besides which, we've had this conversation, like, we don't allow that." And she said, "Well, I just think childhood, everybody should be, people have these ideas about what our kids can have." And I said to my mom, "Is it that big of a deal for you? Do you need him to eat sugar in front of you because you feel like I'm abusing him?" "Well, I do. I think it's just terrible." And I said, "Okay, we're working on him being able to talk. And if he has that, he's not going to be able to talk for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. But is it that important to you? Because if it's that important to you, let's get it over with, because I can't deal with this, with you going behind my back." And I remember my mother going, "Really? Like, him eating that could affect his ability to talk?" And I was like, "Yep, yeah, we've already seen that. But if it's that important to you," and she said, "Well, my God, I would never take away his ability to talk." And that was the end of the conversation. But you're not going to have that conversation with the 8-year-old who lives next door. Even, I will tell you this, I'm going to tell on some people, when my book came out, and there's a whole section in there about this kind of thing, and the fact that for years I didn't allow my son to have Halloween candy. It was just a thing. There was nothing good that was going to come of it for my child. It was sugar, it was artificial colors, artificial flavors. There was nothing that was going to be good for him. So we didn't allow it. And our decision was that it wouldn't be fair, because Dr. Grampuchet says it has to be fair. It wouldn't be fair if he didn't get anything, right? Well, he was so excited to take his little pumpkin, and people were putting colorfully wrapped things in his bucket, and he was so excited about that. That in and of itself was rewarding, but for me as a parent, it wasn't enough. And he had started being into Legos, so we invented the Lego fairy. I've talked about this before on the show. And he was told that the Lego fairy loves candy. And the more candy that you have on the dining room table that you leave on the night of Halloween, then the Lego fairy comes, takes the candy, and you get a big Lego. And the more candy, the bigger the Lego. And this was paradise for my son. He didn't know what the candy tasted like. He wasn't missing anything, and he got a big Lego. So he was fired up to collect candy because it meant a bigger Lego. So I put that in my book, and and a mom that I just love her, went up to my son and said, "I feel so bad for you that your mom wouldn't let you have Halloween candy." And I thought, okay, if that's what you want to feel bad. Now, my child has candy now. He's an adult, and he chooses to have candy. And I love the way he has candy. He'll have like two pieces, and he's like, "That's it for me." And I'm talking Skittles. He'll have 1-2 pieces, and he's like, "That's enough sugar." It's okay. Right. And he had wonderful Halloween. So my point is, you decide what your rules are and then stick to them. And when you feel the peer pressure coming, go, "Oh, there it is. Shannon said it was coming." And I don't know who it's going to come from. Might be the neighbor, might be the 5-year-old boy who lives next door, might be the mom who lives down the street, right? But you got to do you and make your decision about what that is. I'm not here to judge. You get to decide what is appropriate for your child and how much. So I know families that they're like, you can have 2 pieces of candy a day. So you pick out the 2 pieces that you want on Halloween. First, they go through and sort. We'll talk about that in a second. But then you get the 2 pieces of candy, and then every day you can have 2 pieces of candy, and that's it. And that's reasonable. And for their child, that won't lead to tantrums and meltdowns. I think probably the first year that they said, "No, you can only have 2, there was probably a tantrum or meltdown, thinking that maybe if I throw a tantrum, I can get 3 or 4. But if you ride it out, you teach your child that, no, these are boundaries and they're there for a reason. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, keep it simple. I love this slide because, there's all these things that they're going to dip apples, and they're going to cover them in all kinds of candy and yada, yada, yada. And all that's wonderful. And I love a good Pinterest board. But the truth is, that Halloween asks a lot of us and our children. It's a day when we throw a bunch of rules out the window. Stop and think about this, that normally we would say to our kiddos, you don't go and ask for candy from your neighbors. Like, we just don't do that. You don't go up and knock on the neighbor's door and hold out your thing and say something and they give you something. That is not a thing that happens on a daily basis. And a lot of times, these are strangers that we've told our children, you don't talk to. But on this day, we relax that rule. It's confusing to our kiddos. So already there's a bunch of new rules that are just for a day, and for little kids, even kids who aren't on the spectrum, it's like, what is this? What is this crazy day? And, calls into question, are these rules really important? Right? But beyond that, the noises are different, the smells are different, the sounds are different. We don't do a lot of chocolate. I'm allergic to chocolate, but I open that bag of candy to put it in the bucket, and there's always a little bit of chocolate in there, and I go, "Whoo, that smells like Halloween to me," right? There are these sensory wafts of things. Scooping out a pumpkin, it's a very sensory thing. So our kids are being bombarded with new sensory information. Plus, there's kids out walking in the street, and you have to be mindful about, you're in this costume, but you still have to be looking out for cars. It's a lot. Don't complicate it by also having, a 32 item apple dipping experience, because all that hard work might be too much for your kiddo, right? So keep it simple. Edit, edit, edit. Ask yourself, what can you do? I know I was thinking about this the other day, because for the first time in a long time, we're just, having people over on Halloween, just open house kind of a thing. And I was like, oh, I could make this dessert, and I went, what am I doing? I am picking up 2 apple pies, an apple and a pumpkin pie at Costco already made, because you got to keep it simple for yourself and for your kids. So pare it back. Don't make more work for yourself. I know it feels like, oh, but I could do this amazing thing. Save that for another day that doesn't have 32 things. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying don't ever do that, but next year do that on October 10th. And invite 2 kids over to do an apple dipping experience with your child on a day when there's nothing else. Not in 2 days. Okay. So keep it simple. Keep the costume as simple as possible. And by the way, once you get going, I remember the year that my son was Spock for Halloween. And, we ordered different elements, and the ears weren't right. So we ordered different ears that were very expensive. And we worked on the little hand gesture for him to do the thing. And we had the wig, and I had to cut the wig to make it right. He looked so cute. We went to the first house, and the ear thing was driving him crazy. So we lost one ear just like somewhere on the lawn of the first house. I never got it back. It was like, $20 ears, but one of them was gone. And then we go to the next house, and he's like, and so that ear goes in the bucket. Fine, whatever. We go to the next house, and off comes the wig. And then we go to the next house, and, he takes the belt off. So he ended up being himself in a Spock shirt. He had a ball. I had to let go of, we're just keeping it simple. He doesn't want to wear that. He wore it for a second. I got a picture. Let it go. You sing the Frozen song. Let it go, right? Keep it simple and let the elements of it go so that they're happy as clams, knowing that you already got the picture. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, if possible, if your neighborhood is such that this can work out, give your child, even a small child, the experience of giving out treats, that the kids come to the door and, your kid holds out the bucket or takes the candy and puts it in their buckets, whatever your child can do. And you might have to hand it, but it's good for your child to experience both scenarios in this trick-or-treating thing if you can. Now, if it's not something that you can do, you're in an apartment building and they don't allow trick-or-treating, you're behind a gated, fence, Maybe ask a friend if you can come over and can your child help give out candy just for one kiddo, because that's perspective taking, that your kiddo will get a better understanding of what this thing is. And you have to be mindful of the fact that our society, right or wrong, does not let bigger kids go trick-or-treating. I know we can all hang our heads in shame that that is the case, but what I have found is very fun is that when they get older, handing out the candy can become a three-ring circus if they want it to be. They can be all dressed up, they can have a scenario. A lot of our kids get very excited about giving out the candy. So either way, even with the littlest of kids, it's great for them to experience it. And you might have to heavily support it by putting hand over hand and putting the candy in, but it's good for them to see it from the other side. It's a really good experience for them. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay, this is huge. Stop trick-or-treating at the first sign that it's losing its appeal. Now, this is where that letting go of expectation comes in big time, you guys. Because I don't know if you remember when you trick-or-treated, but I remember, gosh, I had a friend who would draw a map. And there would be this big map, and it's like, okay, if we go from 6 to 7 to this neighborhood, and then we can cross this street, and then we can go onto these houses. They had this whole big plan. And I remember I was never up for the whole thing. Do you know? And for our kiddos who are dealing with all that sensory stuff and all the costume stuff, it's best to quit while you're ahead. So you have the plan, and if you're going with other people, go with other people, whatever is appropriate for your child, teen, whatever your child is. But just know, I remember I had one friend who was just, well, you've got to come trick-or-treating with us. It's the best experience with us. And we've got the best neighborhood, and you've got to come. But her kids would run. And they would run up to the house, and they would run, and they would never look back to see where my kid was. And he was, walking in his costume and going up and having to go through the whole thing very slowly. So within 2 homes, they were a mile ahead of us. And I began to realize, okay, this really isn't the thing I was hoping and expecting, that he's trick-or-treating with other kids. But if that's the case, ride the ride this year, but no for next year. So and also, my son wasn't one of those kids with a map going, okay, we can go here, we can go there. He wanted to get a bunch of candy because, the Lego fairy, but very quickly it would all become too much. And what we don't want is to push it. So, I've been with some parents where, you get walking and everybody has the agreement where, when the kids are done, the kids are done. But you've walked a certain distance from the house, right? And the kids start showing signs that this is getting to be a drag, right? And now you got to walk all the way back. And there's always one parent in the group who's like, well, let's at least hit the houses on the way back, because that only makes sense, except that's a meltdown in the making. Either you have a map in your head that has lots of contingencies and that you double back to your house on a regular basis, so that at the first sign that your child is frustrated, the first sign that they're like, asking maybe how much more of this are we going to do, or complaining about their costume is rubbing or is hot or whatever, the first sign that they're not loving it is when you got to rein it in. Is when you got to say, okay, and if you have to, take that costume off. Like, hopefully you have them in something underneath that they can be wearing, and you just take that costume off. And sometimes people go, okay, so, now they're happier. Now we can continue going to houses. Be very careful with that, my friends, because our kids have expressed either through words or through actions that this is waning. And you got a little bit of a time limit to get them back to a sensory de-stress, or you're going to have a meltdown. And what we want to do is create a happy memory, a happy experience, and hit it again next year, right? But if it ends in trauma, it's possible that your child will never want to trick or treat, which is not the end of the world. Let's be honest, there are other things in life. However, it would be nice to create a fun childhood memory for them. So first sign, you got to head back to the house. And if they decide to hit a house on the way, back to get candy, great. But you can say, we don't need to. We don't need to. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Yeah, have an exit plan. If you find yourself, gosh, half a mile from your home and your child in this moment is like, oh no, I can't do it, have an exit plan. Sometimes I see parents who take a wagon with them, and it's cumbersome. It's a pain in the you know what. But if their kiddos get tired, they go, how about you want to ride in the wagon the rest of the way? And you can ride in the wagon on the way home. Other times I see dads saying, hey, let me give you a piggyback ride. I've seen moms doing that too. It's a lot because you got the bucket, you got, whatever. It's a lot. I've seen parents where one parent takes the child and the other parent rides in the car a block back in case we have to get in the car and go. You know your child better than I do. And so you answer the question for yourself, what do I need for an exit plan? If I need to get my child out of this experience in a quick way, how can I do it? Is it a treat that you have in your bag that makes them happy? Do you have the car parked someplace so that you can get in the car? Do you have a wagon, somebody to carry them? What is it? But have an exit plan in case of emergency. And by emergency, I mean literally anything. That your child is starting to have a sensory meltdown, that they're throwing a tantrum, that they get overheated, overstimulated, whatever the thing is, so that they have the opportunity. And sometimes it's just really rude people. I have friends that have taken their teenagers trick-or-treating, and I understand why. And I encourage you, if you're going to do that, to walk the walk that you're going to do beforehand, like earlier in the day or today, and go knock on the doors and say, I want you to know that I'm going to be trick-or-treating with my child who is 16 years old and on the spectrum, because it's the biggest day of the year to him and he's very excited about it. And I want you to, and if it's a problem for you, I will pay for the candy. Usually people will go, oh no, that's okay. And then when they see you at the door with them, they go, that's fine. But if you don't do that, I don't know why people, it's just like the craziest thing that they're like, aren't you a little too old to be doing this? And they start a lecture. It's just candy. You said you were going to give out candy. Your porch light is on. Get over it. Why do you have to give a lecture to people? You don't know what's going on, right? But let's let them know what's going on, is the best possible thing to do. But sometimes somebody's rude to your child and it's all over and you need to get out. So have that exit plan. It's what's best for you. It's what's best for your child. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Oh, yeah. Have a decompress activity to end the evening. So, you know what we always say, that if you're going to stop doing something, even if it's a preferred activity or it's not a preferred activity, it's so much easier to stop doing one activity if you're going to another highly preferred activity. Now, this is really going to depend on your child and what they love and what they don't love. Like, what is the most comfy, cozy, decompress thing that your child loves? Is that sitting on the couch with, their dog with a weighted blanket and no sound, and we just put on the fake fireplace? Is that what that is? Or is it, a special drink that they love to drink that isn't something that's stimulating? That we can sit? Is it playing a game? Is it that they get to be on your phone? What is the decompress that they super duper love? It can be their favorite snack, as long as it's not a sugar up caffeine snack, right? We're trying to move towards going to bed that night. Some families love to watch a certain show, a certain movie. Is there a Halloween movie or the Peanuts? You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. I remember one year when my son was a little bit older, he was having a group of friends over and they were all wearing challenging costumes. Oh my gosh. And I want to say that he was in like 6th grade when this was, and he was one of those blow up T-Rexes, and one of his friends had made the Minecraft character, so he had a box on his head. It looked great, but you couldn't see anything for anything. And then gosh, I can't remember what the third one was wearing, but it was something equally challenging. It was just like murder to walk in. And they were a little bit older, so they had this whole plan about how they were going to get so much candy, but it was getting more and more frustrating for all three of them at every step. And my son was the only one on the spectrum, but everybody has sensory issues. And I had a plan that there was a scary movie that was just appropriate for them, and that I had stuff to make root beer floats. And it was a caffeine-free root beer, uh, but it had sugar in it. I will say that. So the deal was, as they started to get tired, I was like, remember, as soon as you guys tell me you're done, we're gonna go home and we're gonna have root beer floats and we're gonna watch that movie. And I just remember there was a moment where they were like, oh yeah, that's fine, but we're gonna get some more candy. And then the next time I brought it up, they were like, oh, let's go have the root beer floats. And then the costume pieces came off. They went to a couple of more houses on the way back. And then, I want to say it was 8:15 and they were sitting on the sofa enjoying the root beer floats and watching the movie. And nobody felt like, oh, we missed out. They, had the experience in their costumes and they were done, which is wonderful. So you have to decide what is the decompress activity for your child. And have that as the plan. I didn't put this in here, but I think it's really important that you feed them before you take them out. Don't take a dehydrated, hungry child out to trick or treat. I know sometimes that means eating at 4:30, because if you're going to somebody's house, but do feed them something they love so that they're not hungry on the way doing it. Okay, let's look at what the next slide says. Stick to your candy protocol. So once the kiddos are home and you're doing the decompress, it's time for you to do whatever you do about the candy. If you are simply giving it all away, and that's what we would do with the Lego Fairy, we would give it to a local dentist who would ship it to military that were serving overseas, which I loved. I was like, ooh. So in that case, we would stick it on the table, and after my son would go to bed, it would go into a bag that would go into my husband's car, and it would go to the dentist's office. Sometimes it would go into my car so that I would make sure that it got to the dentist, right? Because my husband would go, I'm just going to take out these pieces. Okay. That's not always a good thing. But for those of you who are going to let your child have some candy, it's time to sort through the candy. And I'm a child of the 60s and 70s, where we were the first generation that our parents had to do this. I mentioned this the other day because, a kid got, I don't even know if it's urban legend, but so the story was that a kid got a razor blade and an apple. Before that, I think I had one Halloween before that, and you would go trick-or-treating and you would get an apple, you would get, homemade everything, right? And then it was all over the news that your parents had to check the candy, and we still participate in this. Anything that is not wrapped, you gotta throw away. You just gotta pitch, throw it away. Don't, unless it was from somebody that and would trust with your child's life. You don't take anything that isn't prepackaged, and it's got to be completely sealed. That's rule number one for everybody. But then from there, if you've decided that you're not doing things that have artificial colors and flavors, if you're, not doing anything that's GMO, if you're not doing anything, that gluten and dairy, and there's so many different things. You got to pick through that candy and decide what you're going to leave in the bucket and get rid of the rest. Whatever you have to do, but if it's there, it becomes a discussion, and discussions aren't always verbal. Your child could be tantruming, wanting to have that. And we've seen kids get into the pantry and get that candy, right? If you're going to keep it in the house, put it someplace where your child's not going to find it, like the back of your freezer. I know families that they're like, well, I want a little bit of candy every once in a while. Take it, put it in the back of your freezer. It'll stay good. You'll still be having it in January. But otherwise, get rid of it. Why make it something for your child to tantrum over, and then start the working on this is how many pieces you can have and reward them for sticking to the boundary. I think that's one of the single most important things that we forget sometimes, is that we set the boundary, but then we've got to stick to it. And when they adhere to the boundary, give them big reinforcers, big praise, more time on their phone, whatever, so that they realize, hey, I'm not dying from lack of candy, and it doesn't hurt to follow mom and dad's rule. All right, on to the next one. We're getting close to the end. This is a key one. It's really important that we remember to enjoy it. We have a gentleman who works at CARD. He's the president of CARD, Sangham Pant, and he's a pretty serious guy, you know? And I remember many Halloweens ago, I don't know that he'll appreciate me telling this story, but I thought it got right to the heart of what it's like having little kids and having them grow up. I was filming something like this for Halloween, and he was asking me about it. And he said, make sure you tell people to enjoy it while they're young and they still include you. Because there's only a certain number, think about it this way. There's only a certain number of times you get to pick your child up. And then one day they're too big, right? And then there's no more picking them up anymore. Jen used to be a fixture on my hip. It's lucky the child could walk, because I had him on my hip all the time and was holding him. And it was my favorite thing when I would go to the grocery store, that I would take him out of his 5-point harness and I would pick him up and I would hold him and smell his head and hug him and tell him how much I loved him. And then I would stick him in the shopping cart. And then when we left the shopping cart, I would pull him out. I would hold him to me. I would hug him, smell his head, because they have that unique scent. And just take a minute to appreciate that, oof, this baby, and then put him in his car seat. But, a day came when that didn't happen anymore. When he didn't sit in the front of the shopping cart and he wasn't in the 5-point harness and he got in the car himself or put the 5-point harness on himself. That's life. That's our kids growing up, and we want our kids to grow up. But it's important, even while we're so worried about all the milestones that they're not meeting and what therapy they have to be to at what time, it's important to remember to enjoy it. Because this phase, as hard as it is, it doesn't last long, and there will be some aspect of it that you will miss, because our kids are only little for a very short time. And so what Sangham said to me on that day, he was like, nobody tells you you only get a certain number of Halloweens. And I remember going, oh, because it's true. Your kids, if you think about it, and how many of those Halloweens does your kid know what's going on and appreciate it and enjoy it? Oof, that's even a shorter number of Halloweens. And that's for everybody. But for those of us who have kids on the spectrum, it's even shorter. So it's important to enjoy whatever you have decided to do with your child on that day. It's important to enjoy whatever aspect of it that they're surprised by. It's important to remember that this particular Halloween, is only going to come once. It's one day a year. And so we're letting go of the expectation and appreciating what is. That's really what it's all about. I think that's the last one. Is it not, Chris? I think so. No. Oh, there's one more. And this is an important one, because through the next couple of days, you got to keep the candy boundaries. And let me tell you, the peer pressure gets harder in the days after. I don't know why so many people have so many opinions about what your child eats. I really don't. It's one of the most mystifying things in my life. But one of my favorite phrases is, other people's opinions of my parenting is none of my business. And, what the 14-year-old down the street thinks about what I allow and what I don't allow, none of my business. I love the meme that says, if you're going to give me advice, then you better know what an IEP is. You better know what a BCBA is. You better know what ABA is. You better know what an SLP is. You better know what an OT and a PT and all of these anagrams are, because if you don't know what I'm dealing with. You don't know what I'm up against. So I hope that you guys will be kind to yourself and find what works for you to dial down whatever those voices are. One of the things that I like to remind parents is that the people who have the loudest opinions, you're not going to please them anyway. Even if you gave in to everything that they suggested, and that they were like, well, I think you should do X, Y, and Z. And if you did them all, they still wouldn't be happy with what you're doing. They still wouldn't, because that's just how they run. So hopefully what that does for you is releases you from the obligation to even try. You're not going to make them happy. So you don't owe them anything. And you certainly don't owe them your Halloween or your child's Halloween or the days after. I will say this, that there are all kinds of things that we know help your child on the road to their best days, for them being able to communicate their needs, for them being able to be as much a part of the world as they want. There might be parts of the world that they're like, I don't want to tolerate that, right? But especially when they're little, we want to give them choices. We want to show them, okay, this may not, there's all kinds of things that I don't love. I don't love when things are really loud. But there are, like, let's just talk about the All Ghouls Gala, which can get very loud sometimes. But I love to see all of my friends there, right? So and I love the charity that it works for. So I'm willing to put up with a certain amount of loud so that I can have those other things. And I know it's not a fair comparison, because for folks on the spectrum, the things that are sensory overwhelming are so much more overwhelming than they are to me. But they tell me all the time, sometimes the stakes are such that I need to overcome that to be able to do the thing that I want to do. I've asked, for instance, Kobe Bird before about, is it ever hard for you when a character has to do something, or you're on set and there's other things going on? And he said, well, of course, but the work is more important to me, and I'm able to figure out a way to compartmentalize to be able to do that. But I think part of the reason why he can do that is because he got lots of opportunity to practice, because his mom is exceptional at, giving him opportunities to work on things and find his way. So, this Halloween, you might say to me, you know what, Shannon, we're just going to stay home. We're going to turn the lights off and we're going to stay home and we're going to watch movies because I can't do it. And you know what? I got no judgment here for you at all. I'm sending you a hug. But I also want to challenge you that let's get you more help, because you don't want that to be the rest of your life. I've done that. I've sat at home with the lights off and been like, the world doesn't accept me and my kid, and so maybe we should stay home. It's not a good place, because the world needs your child. And yeah, it's hard. It's hard to send our children out into the world where people are not accepting and look at them and say things. But, I do believe that we have learned, especially in the last couple of years, that if we keep taking our children out and finding the way and showing people the way, that our children can do things, and our children should be allowed to do things, and they should not be discriminated against, that one by one, people start to make room for our kids. One by one, people in the neighborhood start to realize, that's a good kid. And he may communicate slightly different, but that's a good kid. And they're my neighbor. So, do what you need to do this year, but let's take the whole of next year and get your child ready to the point where next year that they can go out and do what's appropriate for them. And that might be trick-or-treating at one house, right? Or it may mean having a friend over who also doesn't want to trick-or-treat. Everything's on the table, right? There is no wrong answer. There's no absolute right answer. It's about what works for you and what works for your child. But it's not good to isolate. It isn't. So I hope that, and it, we're too close. If your plan is to stay home, do it this year, but let's work on it for next year. Anybody have any questions before we sign off? Because I don't know, somehow I've gone through this really quickly. I don't know what that was about. But I hope that you guys will have a memorable, fun experience for yourself and for your child and your children. That's really what Halloween should be about. I know it's about everything under the sun to a lot of people, but let's try to make it about that. Okay, since we have a couple of minutes, I just want to talk briefly about some of the education things that are going on in the world and some of the horror stories that I'm hearing about. There's a lot we still don't know. And I'm loath to talk about things until we know everything that's going to be, but the anxiety that you guys have mentioned, it's too much to be silent. We got to move in a direction. I just want to remind all of you that the law of the land is still IDEA. That has not been repealed, although there has been discussion about it. And we all need to be aware of that there has been discussion about it, but it has not been repealed, which means that your school is responsible for giving your child a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment in which they can have an opportunity to access opportunity. Now, that's hard right now. And your child, if they have a qualifying diagnosis, which autism is entitled to an IEP, an individualized education plan or program, depending on where you are. In Texas, they call it an ARD. I don't know why. I feel like that's a bit of smoke and mirrors to try to get you to not connect it with IDEA, but I don't know. That might just be me. But in any case, your child has a legal right to that. And a lot has been cut, but the Secretary of Education has said repeatedly that existing IEPs will not be impacted by educational cuts. Existing IEPs. And the fallout of that, and we've mentioned it before on the show, is that if you have a child that is coming into the school system this year, that they just weren't giving IEPs, that schools and schools have been trying to peel back IEPs from kids that are a little bit older and doing well. And in some cases, they've been offering a 504 plan to both those early kids and the kids that are a little bit older. And here's why you should not accept the 504. The 504, which is governed by the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Americans with Disabilities Act is under direct fire right now. It's not a discussion. They are talking about dismantling it. So I would not give my child any service that is tied to that because it is in the most peril right now. I hope we can withstand that and that it will not be repealed, but don't settle for a 504. It also isn't appropriate for your child on the autism spectrum 9 times out of 10, really 9.999% of the time, because all that a 504 allots for is that your child have access and that there are no services. And there's no reporting system for a 504 that leaves the school responsible because they're saying, well, your child can have preferential seating, but there's no services, there's no support. It's not a part of a 504. And some schools have gotten very creative and said, oh, no, we'll include speech and OT, but we'll still have a 504. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's not legally actionable if they don't give it to you. So hold tight. Don't submit to the 504. Keep asking for the IEP. What schools are telling people is we don't know if it'll be an educational value to your child, or it won't be an educational value to your child because your child doesn't need the IEP because they're doing fine in their classes. And you have to remind them that part of an autism diagnosis is the social and language component, and that affects everything in the classroom. And you got to come in with examples of ways that your child is impacted in the classroom because of autism that affect their academics. This can be simple depending on your individual child. If your child has ever not turned in a homework assignment because they didn't understand the rules, well, that's a reason to have an IEP. If your child is having any trouble communicating their wants or needs in the classroom, they should have an IEP. Listen, I have seen kids who are known elopers that in kindergarten have eloped and gotten off school property. I have seen schools say they don't need an IEP. I really feel like it's become like what insurance was a few years ago, where they're just going to deny everyone and see which parents are going to fight for it. That's horrific, but be the parent that fights for it. We heard from Brian yesterday, who was saying, one of our viewers, who was saying, you guys fight for things, because he just fought for and got an IEE, an individual education evaluation, which is something you can absolutely ask for. The school has to pay for it. If you feel that they have not appropriately assessed your child or done it in an appropriate amount of time, ask for the IEE. Don't let them drag their feet. Don't be stuck with what they offered. Ask for the IEE, and then they have to pay for it. And remember, you get to decide who actually does the assessment. Okay, I'm trying to think anything else. For those of you with the older kids that they're trying to take away your IEP, just keep putting things out there. Come in with goals and say, here's a goal that he needs or she needs. And often, they've really tried to take away all the aids, which is crazy. But remember, if you have an aid, you should have an aid for the entire day. It just literally makes me bonkers when it used to be when we were in the IEP, and they're like, well, we'll give you an aid for the morning. And it's like a cookie cutter thing. We'll like float that out and see if the mom will take it. And I would say to them, because I'm the queen of sarcasm, I would say, oh, okay, thank you so much. I'll just sit him down and remind him, hey, don't have autism in the afternoon after lunch. And then everybody would look at me and they would go, oh, she's being sarcastic. I would go, what? Why would you give him an aid in the morning and not in the afternoon? And then I would have data and I would say, let's look at, last year, afternoon was the time that he was the most impacted. And they'd go, okay, well, we'll do it in the afternoon. And I would go, great, I'll tell him not to have autism in the morning. And just wait. And they would go, oh, okay. And then they would go, all right, well, we have an aid, but she has to take a break during lunch. Fabulous. I will tell him not to have autism when he's in the multipurpose room, which is the loudest echoey room and if he does anything, throws anything, or hits anybody, then I'll remind you that you're the people who felt that he could be there without support. Which is like sarcasm. I'm not saying that's the best way to approach anything, but it's my way. Yeah. And then I did a one-woman show and made fun of all of them because that's ridiculous. Somebody should make fun of that. That is just ridiculous. That's them saying, okay, we're going to take your child and we're going to fit him into the box that we have for him. And if anything should spill over, that's probably your fault, Mom. Right? That's what they're saying. And that is not what the law of the land says. That's not what DEA says. That's not what any expert on the face of the planet would say. That's only what somebody would say who has budget problems. And believe me, they have budget problems, which, I'm very fond of saying that's not your fault, but it is your problem. It's not your fault that they have budget problems, but it is your problem because they're trying to take away things from your child. And if your child was in a wheelchair and they were talking about taking away your ramp, what would you do? And by the way, they're talking about that kind of stuff. They're talking about repealing ADA so that spaces like schools won't have to be accessible anymore because it's expensive. And they're not wrong about that. It is expensive. Autism is expensive. My goodness, don't we all know that? My mother was clubfoot, both of her feet facing backwards, and my mother was in a wheelchair or on crutches so much of my life. And there were things that we couldn't do as a family because there wasn't access. There were national parks that we couldn't go to. My goodness, my mother would love to go to Yellowstone, and we did. She saw Old Faithful, but she couldn't go on any of the hikes because it just wasn't something she could do. And that impacts not only the person, but that meant none of us did that because we were with her. And part of what ADA did was make a lot of things much more accessible for a lot more people. So we don't want to lose ADA, and we for sure don't want to lose IDEA, but they're under fire. And I would say to all of you, you can't be the people to take that on. If your child is in school right now, your fight is your child's IEP meeting, your child's IEP. And I need you to fight for your child like, it is the single most important thing. And I need for you to not worry about everything else. Because if you guys hold the line with your individual children, first of all, your kids will get a better education, but also it sends a message that we're not giving up. So do that. Those of us whose kids are older, we'll fight the other fights, and hopefully not see those other things go under. Hey, we're out of time, but if you have questions about anything, you can always write to me, Shannon at autism-live.com. Love to hear from you guys. Absolutely. It's one of my favorite things in the world. But I hope that you have a happy and safe Halloween. We didn't talk about this, but I hope you guys all know how critical it is to make sure that your child knows the rules of roads and staying with you and holding your hand. If you need to ask a behavior technician that's working with your child to go with you to trick-or-treating, do it. If you need, in some way, track your child. I love, if I need help, their QR codes. For little kids, I'm just going to be honest that when he was little, we had a little wrist cuff that was on him and on me. Soft, but so that I would not lose him in a crowd of kids, and he could not run away from me into traffic. Stay safe. Make sure that I always buy a thing of the light up bracelets. In fact, I give them away in our Halloween bucket that are glow sticks that you crack them and they're good just for the night, but they help cars to recognize that your child is crossing the street. So, and kids love them. They love to wear them. They love to connect them. They're not that expensive. Make sure that your children can be seen and that they're safe, and have a very, very happy Halloween. We'll see you guys next week. We'll be back with Dr. Doreen and more shows. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.